Alright guys, welcome back to the JellybeanSniper.net NFL podcast. Now, we are sort of in the dying days of free agency. There's not really a lot going on. Certain players signing to veteran minimum deals, one-year deals, things like that. Guys who either need a second chance or are well above 30 and are just looking for a roster spot to maybe contribute to a winning organization. But the one thing that a lot of teams still have a question mark about is quarterback. Looking around the league, and assuming that they're not going to draft a quarterback, the Bills, the Jets, the Buccaneers, the Titans, the Redskins, all of these teams and many more have questions at quarterback. Now, obviously, you assume that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to draft Jameis Winston. You seem to think that the Redskins or the Jets will try and pop on Mariota if he falls down to them at 5 or 6. But we really just do not know what's going to happen with the quarterback situations. And a lot of people are saying the Titans are crazy for going with Zach Mettenberger over Marcus Mariota and thinking that they have to draft Mariota because they need a quarterback that badly. And a lot of people like to criticize the Texans for not taking Teddy Bridgewater last year and instead taking somebody who was a surefire candidate to be Defensive Player of the Year and instead ended up only playing 2 or 3 games and basically not really contributing in those games. Here's the thing. This is a quarterback-needy league. You need a quarterback in order to win. A lot of people have to take big risks, though, in order to get a quarterback. We have seen teams get lucky. The Green Bay Packers have had a stable quarterback situation since 1992. The Indianapolis Colts have had a stable quarterback situation since 1998. And the Patriots are still going off Tom Brady, who could play for another 10 years knowing the way he's going. And even teams like the 49ers really have only had a couple of down years, basically since the early 80s. When they went from Joe Montana to Steve Young to Jeff Garcia, and then a couple Tim Rattay years in there, Alex Smith sort of struggling, but now up to Colin Kaepernick, who had one down year, but generally they're pretty okay at quarterback and have a better situation than most other franchises. Meanwhile, a team like the Buffalo Bills have been struggling since 1996 to find a replacement for Jim Kelly. And besides a couple of good Doug Flutie seasons and a couple of good Drew Bledsoe seasons, their greatest hope has been Ryan Fitzpatrick, who had 6 good games and 10 bad games, but that still warranted a big contract extension. Quarterbacks are such a need nowadays. You can't just win running the ball and with a strong defense, despite what some teams are going to try and do this year. That's why you see someone like Mike Kafka getting back in the league. That's why the Dolphins just took a flyer and signed Josh Freeman to be their backup quarterback. And that is why everyone is always trying to force their way to take a quarterback way sooner than they need to. I have seen the Washington Redskins mortgage their entire future to try and get Robert Griffin III, who had one good year, had a terrible knee injury, and has never been the same since. I have seen teams like the Oakland Raiders take Jamarcus Russell, a surefire number 1 overall pick, and watch him flame out of the league. I have seen teams wait and take Russell Wilson in the 3rd round, and he turns out to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback for them. Drew Bledsoe, a number 1 overall pick, gets benched for a 6th round pick in Tom Brady, and it turns out to be an upgrade. I have seen the Cleveland Browns criticized during the process of the draft for watching Colt McCoy fall past. Somebody who they projected to be a late 1st round pick, they take him in either the 3rd or 4th round. They criticize them for not taking him in the 2nd round. And now he is the 3rd string quarterback on the Washington Redskins. Probably could have been a starter if he had joined, say, the Bills or the Jets or what have you. But a very below average starting NFL quarterback. A good backup quarterback, but clearly not someone who should have been taken in the 2nd round. But that is the criticism that is taken. Skip Bayless went on a rampage about the Houston Texans not taking Johnny Manziel with the number 1 overall pick. Jerry Jones almost took Johnny Manziel and instead solidified his offensive line. Johnny Manziel currently is still in rehab. Best wishes to him, and I hope he recovers, but on the football field, has shown nothing so far that warrants him even being a 4th round selection. So, everyone wants to jump up and down about the quarterbacks and how you need to risk everything to get one. When in reality, you just need a very good system for them to come into and eventually mature. And then you will be fine. So, if the Titans decide they're better off with Zach Mettenberger than Marcus Mariota, you know what? We could be talking about Zach Mettenberger, Hall of Famer in 15 years, Marcus Mariota, the number 5 overall pick who was a bust. Or it could very well be Marcus Mariota going into the Hall of Fame. We don't know these things yet. We won't know them for some time. But don't think that the Titans have no idea what they're doing because they're not seriously considering Marcus Mariota. Oh, they're saying they are now, but that's because they want to trade down from that number 2 overall pick. They'd like to get someone to Washington Redskin their way into that pick for Mariota, and I don't blame them. That's a smart business decision. If they do take Mariota, great. If they don't, you know what? That's not who they wanted. So, don't act like if you don't take Marcus Mariota, you're dooming yourself to 10 years of failure. Because you can take Mariota and watch him be a washout. Just ask the Bengals how well Achilles Smith worked out. Now, because it's been a slow couple of news weeks, had some minor releasing, the Bears released Roberto Garza, the Saints signed Joseph Morgan. Those are the kind of names that are popping up right now. You see someone like Jamarcus Webb getting signed by the Raiders. Who else? Do we have anything else? The Jaguars released the fullback. Rolando McClain re-signed in Dallas. B.J. Raji re-signed in Green Bay. Miles Austin signed. This is just the kind of people who are getting signed right now. So you're not really looking at a very big and exciting news week. Oh, Matt Schaub is now the backup quarterback in the Ravens. Good for them. So what I thought I'd do is I went through, and this is just what I decided to do one day. I decided to do my off-season, so far, power rankings. This isn't going to be the finale power rank. It's not going to be the final power rankings of the off-season. I'll probably do another one in July or so, right before, training camp starts and all of that. But I figured we'd go through, we'd rank all the teams based on who they re-signed, released, everything else that they've done so far this off-season. And figure out, are some of these teams actually winners? Have they vaulted themselves really that much higher than they already were? Have the big splashes meant anything? Or are the little trickles just the better impact moves? So I figure, let's go through, let's look at all these teams, and let's rank them. And we'll start at 32, and we'll work our way back up to the top. Now, at number 32, I have the Oakland Raiders. I have them right now, not necessarily as the worst team. I don't think they're going to have the worst record necessarily next year. They have a solid quarterback, hopefully of the future, in Derek Carr. Their offensive line is iffy, but better than a lot of teams out there, such as the Jacksonville Jaguars, who can't protect Blake Bortles worth a damn. Their wide receivers, they definitely need to address that. Their running game, they lost Darren McFadden. They signed Roy Halou as his replacement, and they went out and they signed Trent Richardson. Apparently they thought I knocked them down 3 spots just because they signed Trent Richardson, and he has a legitimate chance at playtime. That's how badly they need a running back, which is a strong running game is what you need to support your young quarterback. But I don't think the Raiders have done a lot to upgrade this year. I think they have a good young core starting to develop. You've got Derek Carr on the offensive side. On the defense, you've actually got, obviously Khalil Mack, C.O. Moore, good as a compliment. You've got some pieces in place there. And hopefully they don't waste their time like they did last year, who they signed all of these aging veterans and have released them already this year. Not a good look for them. I do think they have a chance to be competitive in a few years, but we need to get there. And I do like the fact that they hired Jack Del Rio as their head coach, which is a major upgrade for them. Probably the best coach they've had since John Gruden. Next up at number 31, we have the Tennessee Titans. There's a lot of talent on this team as well. It's just, they made a lot of big signings, getting a new pass rush in there, but you're basing your signings on that Brian Arakpo will bounce back and be the dominant player he seemed to be in his first 2 seasons, and you're hoping that, he's going to help along with whoever. If you're taking a pass rusher at number 2, which is where people feel they're going to go, That's where you're putting all your eggs, but you're still running Bishop Sankey at running back. You still have Zach Mettenberger as your quarterback, who, 6th-round pick last season, he's still developing. I'm not saying he'll never turn out to be any good. I'm saying he's got a lot of work to do, and he needs a lot of help, and you're giving him Bishop Sankey. The offensive line, there's still some question marks there. Yes, you have Taylor Lewan, but Michael Ruse retired. You released Michael Oher, which, I'm sorry, Blindside, I love that movie. I love his story, but his days in the NFL, he's almost done. Luckily, teams like the Carolina Panthers really need offensive line help, but there's just a lot in Tennessee that I'm not a huge fan of. There's a lot there, but I am starting to question whether or not Ken Wisenhunt actually knows what he's doing. Next up at number 30, we have the team holding the number 1 overall pick in Tampa Bay. And again, the big thing here, my power rankings are based off of what you have right now. Even if I'm assuming that Jameis Winston is going to go number 1 overall, we don't know. They haven't come out and said that they're going to sign him to the contract. We haven't seen that in a few years. So we don't exactly know what's going to happen. We just assume that Jameis Winston is going to go, but until they call his name, we're not going to know. So for right now, they don't have a quarterback. I will continue to question whether or not Doug Martin is any good at running back, or if he just had a really great 3-game stretch and people are still basing it on that. They have very good wide receivers, so whoever plays quarterback will be fine. Their offensive line needs a little work. Defense, you've got Gerald McCoy. You've got, I just lost his name. Levante David, the linebacker. You've got a pretty good secondary. So there's pieces there, but without the right quarterback in there, offensively, you're anemic. And defensively, there are some good pieces, yes, but you don't have a good defense. And, they still played a weak division, so a 3-game improvement, and they're right in contention for the NFC South. Who, spoiler alert, I don't think the NFC South got much better as a whole so far. So Tampa Bay's down at number 30. Easy for them to jump up. They could easily jump up to a number 25 overall team. Just with a couple more, a very good draft. They could easily turn around a bit. And also, I'm not 100% sold that Lovie Smith knows what he's doing anymore. And that he can only be good if he has multiple Hall of Famers on his defense. Which, obviously, he lucked out. He had Brian Urlacher. You can argue Lance Briggs had a Hall of Fame type stretch for a while. Same with Charles Tillman. He has Gerald McCoy, and that's about it. For dominant defensive players. Some pretty good defensive players, but dominant, you've only got Gerald McCoy. And he's arguably the only dominant player on that team. Although, high hopes for Mike Evans. Number 29, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mentioned it earlier. Their offensive line, not very good. In fact, I'd call it the worst offensive line in the league. Or at least in the conversation for the worst, but probably the worst. You have Blake Bortles, who it's hard to get a grasp on him because he had what seems like a very good young wide receiver core, but they were all rookies. He was a rookie, they're all rookies. He had no reliable running game. He has no offensive line. So, and tight ends, they just went out and signed Daniel Thomas, which hopefully should help, but that's all you got. Defensively, they had a pretty good pass rush, but Gus Bradley he came from Seattle. He knows what he's doing, and he can get the most out of a defense who maybe isn't as talented as the numbers would imply. So their defense is always going to play above where they should be playing. So that's a plus side. Now, hopefully they can get him some weapons to work with. They're drafting number 3? Yeah, they're drafting number 3 overall. Hopefully, they find a way to get a good running back in this draft. There are quite a few of them. If they wanted to trade down, if Marcus Mariota is still floating around, I know there's other needs there. But the Jaguars trading down to say, let's say that they trade down to number 15 with the Saints or something along those lines. Who, if they wanted to get Mariota, and in the middle of the draft decided that that's where they wanted to draft the Todd Gurley type. I feel like that'd be a good fit for them. Maybe a Melvin Gordon. Just, they need a strong running game, and it'll help the rest of the offense out. But, again, I mean, Jake Long's floating out there in free agency. I know he's injured a lot, but he's not much worse than what you got already. Maybe you can get him for a minimum deal. Number 28, I have the Washington Redskins. They've made some moves. You know, I like what their new GM is doing. He's not going out and making all the big expensive signings, but there's a lot of work to do on this team. They finished dead last in their division for a reason. They will probably finish dead last again this year because this quarterback situation needs to be figured out. They're committed to RG3. They're not committed. They leave him off the season ticket holder letter. Then they vow about him. Then they say they might take Marcus Mariota if he's sitting there. They need to figure out what the hell they're doing. It's just from an organization standpoint, they're idiots. I don't know if Jay Gruden is actually a good head coach or not. We'll never know. If you put him in a stable organization, will he have success? Maybe. Going on the Redskins? He won't. He's not going to be the head coach after 2015. If we're being brutally honest, they're not going to have a good season this year, and he's butting heads with what the rest of the team wants. He'll be out of the, he'll be gone in a year. He might not even make it through the season. That's just how the Redskins roll. So, don't expect a lot out of the Redskins this year. And luckily, this whole RG3 thing is going to be such a huge storyline yet again this year that you're probably not going to hear much about the fact that they're terrible. Do you guys realize they have the number 5 overall pick? You guys were so everyone else was so focused on, RG3 and Kirk Cousins and Colt McCoy that I don't think people realize just how bad of a season they had. They were scoring a lot of excuse me. They were scoring a lot of points at one point, but they weren't doing much with it. They were still losing these games. They were scoring 42 and losing 50-42. Next up, we have the Chicago Bears, who tried to get rid of Jay Cutler, couldn't get rid of Jay Cutler, couldn't justify it, and are now just stuck with him for 2 more years. They're stuck with him for 2015 and basically for 2016. They traded away Brandon Marshall. Alshon Jeffrey's really good, but still you don't want to, you can say what you want about Brandon Marshall. He's still a very good player. They still have Matt Forte at running back, but that defense is abysmal. And it's so weird to say about a Chicago Bears team, but that defense just cannot do anything. Who do they have? They shell out of this money for Jared Allen, who is washed up, and people kind of thought he was washed up, but he just confirmed it going into Chicago. Meanwhile, Julius Peppers goes to Green Bay and has a career renaissance. Their secondary is awful. There's not a lot of bright spots on that defense. Offensively, they're okay. But defensively, there's a reason they were losing 42-0 to the Packers by halftime at one point. That's just how bad this defense is. Famous play, when the Bills beat the Bears in week 1 and people thought it was a huge upset by the Bills, that overtime run by Fred Jackson where he takes Chris Conte by the face mask and throws him, everyone thought, oh my god, what an amazing play. Chris Conte is no longer on the team because he was that terrible. I'm still going to accredit it to Fred Jackson being awesome. I'm slightly biased. But the Bears' defense is just so awful. Jay Cutler is so hot and cold. Now, granted, I'm saying this as someone who, given the quarterback situation in Buffalo, I'd take him. But he's so terrible. They have good wide receivers. They still have one very good wide receiver. It's very easy to draft another one in this draft. Very good tight end. Excellent running back. Pretty strong offensive line. Jay Cutler this is what he's going to do. There's not, he's going to turn around this year. He's not. He's just not. This is Jay Cutler. This is how he's going to be forever. And it's just unfortunate because there's a lot of talent on this offense. John Fox, maybe he can fix some things, but he seems like he's a good coach. He's gotten the Panthers to the Super Bowl. He's gotten the Broncos to the Super Bowl. But something about him it seems like he's lucky. It just seems like he's lucky. But I think getting the defensive coordinator from the 49ers will be a bigger upgrade for them than the new head coach. At least that's my opinion. Next up, we've got the Cleveland Browns. who it's just a dumpster fire in Cleveland so far this offseason. And I almost put him lower, but there's a lot of pieces on this team that I like. Not necessarily young pieces, but their defense is playing pretty well. They have a very good defensive-minded coach in Mike Pettin who can get the most out of them. Their wide receivers are non-existent. Josh Gordon, will he ever see the field again for any NFL team? Who knows? Running backs, they need to get that sorted out. They're doing running back by committee, so you don't need a strong run game from any individual, but they need to figure that out. Their offensive line, their offensive line is solid. They have a great offensive line, and unfortunately when Alex Mack got injured last season, that sort of threw the whole rest of the season out of whack. That's when the 4-game losing streak happened and all of that stuff. So they should have a very good running game again. But quarterback, do you really think Josh McCown's an upgrade over Brian Hoyer? Brian Hoyer looked abysmal in the last couple of games, but Josh McCown, really? There was another Buccaneers quarterback, if you wanted him, you probably could have made a good offer for Mike Glennon. That probably would have helped out a little bit more. I don't know what the Browns are going to do in this draft. They have 2 picks. One of them better be on a wide receiver. One of them needs to be on a wide receiver because it doesn't matter who else they're going to sign in free agency. They can sign all the washed-up old guys they want, but they need to do something. And, also, terrible new logo design. That's really not helping their cause. Coming up next at number 25 is the New Orleans Saints, who I thought was going to be in the Super Bowl last season. Clearly they did anything but that. This offseason, because of the salary cap and just all their restraints, maybe they should have just gotten rid of Drew Brees, but instead they just shipped off everybody. They are trading offensive linemen, wide receivers. They sent off Jimmy Graham to get Max Unger. Apparently they want to go with a better running football attack, but then they signed C.J. Spiller, who's still more suited for a passing spread attack. I don't really know what they're going to do, but there's just a lot of questions there, and they're really limited, and I don't think this team is set up to use the last few years of Drew Brees' career properly. This defense is not getting you to the playoffs, let alone the Super Bowl. And Drew Brees can put up all the numbers he wants, but he needs some help. The running game, maybe it'll help. Maybe. I don't know. Mark Ingram, are you gonna still be good, or are you just gonna sort of Darren McFadden it and have 1.5 good seasons and then go back to being a bust? Who even knows? C.J. Spiller, again, he's a change of pace back. That's your big impact signing. You ship off your best pass catcher. You're keeping Marcus Colston, who was a nice story that he was a 7th round pick. 3 picks from being Mr. Irrelevant, but he has a solid career, but his career is almost at the end. Not everyone can play until they're 37, I'm sorry. It's just how it happens sometimes. He seems like he's nearing the end. You ship off one of your good young wide receivers, I get it. Apparently Drew Brees had some issues with him. But I don't know what the Saints are doing right now. They're going to be in cap casualty hell, and you're going to get a bunch of 6-10 and 7-9 seasons for the next couple of years until Drew Brees finally retires or is traded or released or whatever it may be, and then you're going to get the first overall pick. And you just have to hope that you do it during a season when the number 1 overall pick is worth having. Next season is not that season, I don't think. Number 24, it is the NFC South champions, which lets you know who I think is the best team in the NFC South, the Carolina Panthers. Again, offensive line, you're claiming Jonathan Martin off of waivers from the 49ers. You're signing Michael Oher. Your wide receivers, you have Kelvin Benjamin. You need another one. The running game, D'Angelo Williams is finally gone, but is Jonathan Stewart going to actually be the answer? Are you going to finally let him carry the load, or are you just going to start giving carries to some random 4th stringer that you found off the street? The defense, you have some pieces. Greg Hardy's gone, but he was gone last season, and they won a division. There are some pieces there, but this is going to be a crucial season for Riverboat Ron. I don't know if they have another bad season this year. You're not going to win a division at 8-8 or 7-9 again this year. As weak as I think it is, I do think certain teams can turn it around. I don't know which of these teams it can be, but someone is going 9-7 in this division at least and winning it. So if you go 6-10 with the Panthers, I don't think Ron Rivera is back in 2016. Now, this could very well be the team that goes 9-7 or 10-6. They have enough talent there. They have to get enough lucky breaks, but I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in the Panthers right now. But again, this is all before the draft, and a lot of teams can fix a lot of issues with a strong rookie class. Next up, at number 23, a team that I think a lot of people are higher on, and they had a very good record last season, but the Kansas City Chiefs. And I just don't see it. Yes, Jeremy Maclin is an upgrade at wide receiver for them, but that's not the whole story. You know, yes, they traded for Ben Grubbs, but that's not going to fix their offensive line. I mean, you got to figure if Jamal Charles can come out and have 1,600 rushing yards, then that'll be exactly what they need on offense. Defensively, they've got a pretty good pass rush 1-2 combo in Tamba Ali and Justin Houston. So, it's not out of the realm of possibility that this could be a good team, but I don't see it. There's something about this team. They went 9-7, and it seems like they got really lucky to get to those 9 wins. You caught the Patriots on a bad week, blew them out, made yourself look good, but you got blown out in week 1 by the Titans. Didn't lose to the Titans, got blown out by the Titans. You played the Bills, you got lucky in that because they decided Kyle Orton was a good quarterback, and he can't complete a pass in a red zone. There are a couple wins there where you just got lucky. You went 9-7, and that just means you have to play a tougher schedule. So, I don't think the Chiefs are very good, and I think with a tougher schedule, they're going to flop. I think they're going to flop. Number 22, I have a team that a lot of people are more down on. I'm not as much despite this ranking, but the San Francisco 49ers. Again, this is... You can't lose 2 of your top 3 options at middle linebacker, both of which to retirement, and lose your head coach to somebody who I'm not sure can be a competent head coach. You can't lose one of the best running backs in your franchise's history. You can't lose one of your top wide receiving options. You can't do all of that and expect to not at least drop in my power rankings. Now, how that affects them on the field, I'm not sure yet. They are a very talented team. They have a very strong defensive group still, even after losing Patrick Willis and even after losing Chris Borland. There is still reason to believe this could be a playoff team next season, but I just don't see it right now because I'm not 100% sure. You're banking on Carlos Hyde breaking through and being a very strong running back to replace Frank Gore. You're banking on Colin Kaepernick bouncing back and being able to put together a good season. You're banking on something coming out of this wide receiver core where you lost not only Michael Crabtree, technically he's still a free agent, but they're not bringing him back, but you also released Stevie Johnson. So Anquan Bolden is still in town. He's aging, and the way he plays, he ages faster than maybe other more finesse players would. You're talking about a guy who fractured his face and played 2 weeks later. That's just what Anquan Bolden does, and I love him for it. But you are ruining your long-term potential. Offensive line, you lost Mike Iupati, but you still got a pretty solid offensive line, all things considered. There's still reasons to believe in this team. I'm not one of those people who thinks this is going to be a 4-12 team. I don't know where you're getting that from. I think 8-8 seems right for this team. But, I don't know. It could be. Or they could end up going, 6-10. I don't think the floor is going to completely drop on them, but I don't expect them to go 11-5, 12-4. I don't think that's in the cards for them. But moving on to number 21, the team who I think will win the NFC South and who I thought was going to win the NFC South last season, the Atlanta Falcons. They still have Matt Ryan. They have the second best quarterback in the NFC South, but they have a better team around him. And that's pretty sad considering the offensive line struggles, no running game, and probably one of the worst defenses in the league. But you have Julio Jones, so you have a much better wide receiving option. Roddy White, he's in his, I don't want to say tailspin, his career is coming to its end, and you don't know how much he's got left in the tank, but there's still some viable options there. And again, there's another team, they're in the top 10 for the draft, another team where I think they should draft Todd Gurley high. A lot of people would say, oh my god, how are you going to draft a running back in the top 10? They need one. They need a pass rush, yes, but maybe they should just take a running back. Maybe that's what they should do. The offensive line, they might be okay, but I think the Falcons should win this division. They have a new head coach. You finally got rid of Mike Smith. Mike Smith easily cost them 2 or 3 wins this season, so if you put in just an average NFL coach, they're 9-7 and win this division comfortably. So I think with a good coach, and I think Todd Bowles could be that guy. Not Todd Bowles. No, Todd Bowles is the Jets head coach. Why did I just blank on who the head coach of the Falcons is? It's Dan Quinn. Dan Quinn is who I was thinking of. I don't know why. Defensive coordinator. I'm sorry, I got it mixed up. But I think Dan Quinn can be a major upgrade, even though a lot of the questions out there are just, can you trust a defensive coordinator from a team who is based around like the head coach is a defensive coach? I think sometimes it can work out. You can argue that the Ravens were just had defensively good players for a while. Marvin Lewis worked out he's still in Cincinnati all these years later. And the guy who to succeed him was Rex Ryan, who has had a pretty good career so far. Maybe not the deep success that some people would want, but a couple of championship game appearances. So, I don't think that Dan Quinn is necessarily going to be a bust head coach. If he can just be average, then I think the Falcons can make a big turnaround here. Next up at number 19, a team who actually escalated in the rankings by trading away its starting quarterback, the St. Louis Rams, who shipped off the always injured Sam Bradford to get Nick Foles, who, yes, was injured last season, but they don't have to be deeply committed to him like they were with Sam Bradford. So now this is a team who could arguably jump up and try and go after Marcus Mariota. A lot easier for them to trade up to, say, number 3, number 4, if they so desired, because they have a pick. I believe it's like number 10. I believe that's the draft order. Wait, I have this written down somewhere. Or maybe I don't have it written down. Come on, where are you? There it is. Alright, so we have the Rams. Come on, computer, load it up. Yeah, the Rams are at number 10. I'll leave that open. So, very professional podcast, by the way. The Rams could move up. If they wanted to jump up, it wouldn't cost them a lot. They've got some assets. Maybe you ship Nick Foles in with it. Who knows? But that's a team that could trade up for Marcus Mariota without having to sacrifice a ton to get him. But there's a lot of talent on this team. The running backs, we're not sure of. Offensive line, it's starting to come together. They got rid of Jake Long. He was never around anyways. Defensive line, they have 5 great defensive linemen, and they only play a 4-3. Linebackers, they're just going to be either they're not going to be important, they're not essential because of the defensive line, or they're just going to play better because of that. That should carry to the secondary. It's just a matter of the quarterback play. And if you think that Nick Foles is an upgrade over Austin Davis or Sean Hill, which I do, that's an 8-8 team right there. Which means a couple of good breaks, 9-7, 10-6, figuring out exactly how much the NFC West is going to fall. I don't think it's going to be very far. I think the Cardinals will have a really good season again. I think the Seahawks are still the best team in at least their division, probably in all of the NFC. It's them and the Packers, I think. So they still play in a tough division. If the 49ers did plummet like everyone thinks, then maybe it's a little easier for them. But I think the Rams could have the potential to get up to 8-8, 9-7, and maybe compete for that number 6 seed. Next up at number 18, a team that went crazy in the offseason. Yeah, number 18. Did I say 16? But the New York Jets are number 18. And this is a team that could potentially land Marcus Mariota. If they do, I'm not sure that I would escalate their ranking at all. They went out, they added some weapons on the offense. Defensively, they overspent to keep David Harris. I haven't understood that much. They bring in Todd Bowles. This is the team that hired Todd Bowles. So they went out and they got Darrelle Revis. They got Antonio Cromartie. They brought back basically the team that led them to the playoffs 5 years ago. I don't understand the Jets sometimes, but Todd Bowles, you gave him the weapons to work with. I think that defense will play solid. I don't think they'll miss a beat from where they played with Rex. They already have talent on the defensive line. And offensively, it's just a matter of, I've seen Chan Gailey turn Ryan Fitzpatrick into a borderline Pro Bowler. So, do I think that putting Geno Smith in that offense could at least make him borderline average starter? Potentially. It's not out of the realm possibility. And if not, they brought Ryan Fitzpatrick in. So, with some better quarterback play, yes, I could see this being a 7-9, 8-8 team this year. Easily. I think they could do that and make a big turnaround this season. But I do think that unless they get their hands on Marcus Mariota, there is not a long-term quarterback answer on this roster. And, that's been the story with the Jets for 40, 50-something years. So, that's just what you got to get used to in New Jersey. I'm sorry. So, I think the big turnaround from the Jets, but don't book your playoff tickets just yet. But we go from them to a team that I think is going to take a stumble. The Detroit Lions are at number 17. Now, it was hard for me to say this because if you look at their roster, they should be pretty good, even with losing Ndamukong Suh and Nick Fairley. But that's the heart of their defense. That's where they made the defense way better than maybe it should have normally played. So you're taking out a really, really big part of your defense. And on top of that, your offense struggled. You have Calvin Johnson, who was injured a lot last season, yes. But Golden Tate stepped right in and replaced him fairly well. So you have two very good weapons there. But Matt Stafford just... I know a lot of people got offended at this, but you might have to start throwing a Jay Cutler label on him soon. Because it seems like that might be his career trajectory. Which, Jay Cutler's career trajectory is Jeff George. So you might be looking at that situation again. Which, for the Lions, considering their history, it's an upgrade. And I think you can make that work, but running game, Reggie Bush, Joique Bell, are you kidding me? And Reggie Bush is gone now, but I don't see a lot to love out of this team. I'm not sold on Jim Caldwell being a good head coach. I think that might be part of it. And I think losing your defense, which won you a lot of games, I could see them tumbling. I could see them falling behind, maybe not the Bears, but falling behind the Vikings in this division race, which should be evidenced by the fact you haven't heard me mention the Vikings yet. But I do think that the Lions, they're going to take a tumble. Right in the middle, number 16, we have a team that made arguably the biggest splash of the offseason, the Miami Dolphins. I do think Ndamukong Suh is an upgrade for any team, and I think with the Dolphins, he's a welcome addition. He will improve their defense, which was already, well, for the first half of last season at least, was pretty good. But you've got some great pass rushers there, and he should be able to make them better, clear up some double teams. So I think in that regard, it's an upgrade. But, and it's a big but, their linebackers are still poor. They still do not have a very good linebacking core, and they released linebackers. Secondary, they need some help. They put so much money into Ndamukong Suh that they can't upgrade anywhere else. Offensive line, I get it. You want to let them gel and upgrade, but there's just something there I'm not sure of. And wide receiver is just, who's Tannehill throwing the ball to? Like, I get it, the Bill Lazor, Chip Kelly offense, you don't value the wide receiver that much. That's fine. But you still, they need bodies, too. Like, I think they only have 4 wide receivers on their roster. Unless they got some guys on the practice squad. They sacrifice so much to get Ndamukong Suh. I think Jordan Cameron, if he can avoid concussion problems, I think he helps that team too. As a pass catcher, I think he's a solid addition, will be an upgrade for them, but I don't think that covers up the complete lack of having any sort of wide receiver core. So, I do like some of their signings, but I think they sacrificed way too much to get Ndamukong Suh when they should have let him go somewhere else. But that's just me. They were number... Hold on, let me recount this. My count is way off. I'm off by one on everyone. So the real number 16 team. Sorry, we were off by one in the last couple. St. Louis is number 20, not number 19. That's where I threw myself off. Number 16 is the Minnesota Vikings, who a lot of teams are high on, and my thing is this. If you're telling me that Adrian Peterson is coming back and he's going to play for the Vikings, I will put them higher. Until that happens, I'm going to assume he is not going to play on the team because he doesn't want to, and I could see him holding out. Even though he is contractually obligated to play for the Vikings, I could see him holding out and not playing it down for this team this year. And in that sense, I think that hurts them. But they went 7-9 last season. I think Teddy Bridgewater, I don't know if there is going to be a sophomore slump. I haven't noticed that lately. It seems like that's not a thing anymore for quarterbacks. So I think he could have another solid season. Wide receivers, they went out and who did they? They acquired somebody, and now I'm blanking on who it was. Oh, it's Mike Wallace. That's why I'm blanking on it. So he's not going to be a huge impact, but you can argue he's an upgrade at wide receiver over who they had in Greg Jennings last season. You know, I don't know where they're going to go in the draft. I think by the time they draft, I don't know how many wide receiver options are going to be left. They might know by that point whether or not they're going to keep Adrian Peterson on the roster. Maybe they have to go there. Some offensive line help wouldn't be a bad idea. You know, but Mike Zimmer is a good coach, and I think they're going to be fine. But there are questions I have remaining right now at this point in the offseason where I'm not comfortable putting them any higher than right in the middle. But they went 7-9 last season without Adrian Peterson, so maybe they could do better with another season of under the belt of Teddy Bridgewater. Number 15, we have the Houston Texans. They're this high basically entirely because of J.J. Watt. Andre Johnson's gone. That'll hurt them, but I don't think that much. Quarterback, they literally are just signing everybody who's ever backed up Tom Brady. I don't, again, this is a team, no long-term answer at quarterback. They passed on Teddy Bridgewater last year. They passed on Derek Carr. I get why you pass on Carr, but it just, they need a quarterback and they're not going to be able to get one. Now, maybe there's someone who takes a Bryce Petty or something like that in round 2, but I don't think, I mean, maybe Ryan Mallett, I mean, he didn't get a chance to prove anything, so maybe long term he is the answer, but that's a big if. And until I see it happen, I'm just going to consider it an if. Otherwise, I mean, there's some talent on this roster defensively. If everyone comes back healthy, they should be okay. You know, is Jadeveon Clowney going to be healthy? Who knows? J.J. Watt's going to be a beast. Chalk him up for probably another 18 to 20 sacks again next season. So he'll make everyone in that defense better, and arguably the offense. So with a solid draft, this team could contend. They do play in a weak division so that they can feast off of, obviously with the exception of the Colts. But this offseason, I just don't feel like they've done enough to upgrade. They haven't done enough to really downgrade either, but they haven't really upgraded as much as they might have need to in order to move into one of those wildcard spots. So they're basically competing with the NFC North and presumably a very strong AFC East this season. Next up at number 14, a team that maybe I have too high compared to some people, but the New York Giants. This is not Odell Beckham love. This is faith in a team that has consistently had down seasons and then come back strong without really having to do a massive overhaul. Odell Beckham obviously is a monster. Having Victor Cruz back, if he shifts down to the number 2 option, it's a pretty good number 2 option. Eli Manning had a pretty good statistical season last year. Running game, they went out, they added Shane Vereen. Running back by committee is what they've always done with success. If they can address the offensive line in the draft, if they can get more out of this defense, I think they're going to be fine. I think the Giants could, especially if the Eagles, and I do have the Eagles a little bit higher, if Chip Kelly really has no idea what he's doing and just blows up in his face, perfect opportunity for the Giants to jump in at number 2. And the Cowboys, if losing DeMarco Murray is a big impact, I mean, don't be surprised if the Giants win the NFC East next season. That's just how it could all work out. So they're in a very good position, and all they have to do is just be steady, and they'll be fine. So I think the Giants, sleeper team to win their division. I don't think this is a Super Bowl roster, but when the Giants are in the playoffs, anything can happen at that point. This is not a team you want to face at 10-6 and in a wild card spot. That's all I'm going to say. Number 13, I have the San Diego Chargers. I kind of wrote this a little before the whole Phillip Rivers thing came out and became like a story. I don't think it's going to have any effect in the 2015 season, but I do think 2016 and beyond, this might be the last season we still see Phillip Rivers. This also might be the last season we see San Diego with a football team. But I don't think this is going to be a big deal for Phillip Rivers. I don't think it's going to affect him on the field that much. I think the only people it's going to affect are San Diego, the coaching staff and the ownership, and of course the fans. So it's unfortunate, but I think that on the field they should be okay. They're consistently 8-8, 9-7, and I think another season like that is in the works. They solidified the offensive line with some of their moves a bit. You got to hope that their wide receivers can bounce back. And running back, I don't know, something could happen. They've had success before without, after LT left, so they don't really need the running game that much. But I think this could be a good team. I will not bet against them ever because they always are in the conversation. I mean, last season, they started off the beginning of the season, myself included, a lot of people thought that they were the best team in the league. So they're only 8 games removed from that stretch. And they still finished 9-7 last season and upgraded so far this year. Between keeping who they already had and then just some smart, not high-priced signings. So I think this could be a good season for San Diego. Number 12, and this is, you guys are going to think I'm biased, but I do like these moves, is the Buffalo Bills. They made a lot of big splashes, yes, but if you look around at their roster, very similar to what the Jets did, they added more offensive weapons. Their defense was better than the Jets' defense last season. That's sort of where the edge comes from. Obviously they finished with a much better record. So they've got not as far to go to really be an upgrade. They're one Kansas City Chiefs win away from being in the playoffs last season. Rex Ryan, this is the best head coach the Bills have had since Marv Levy. Quarterback is obviously going to be an issue, but I'm not going to sit here and say Tyrod Taylor is the answer. I don't know. He was a backup quarterback for the Ravens. He never saw the field. I'm not going to sit there and toot his horn, but what I will say is Matt Castle has led some teams to some success. He's led the Chiefs to the playoffs, and he had an 11-5 season with the Patriots coming off an undefeated season. This team is not as talented as that undefeated Patriots team, but it's got some offensive weapons. Percy Harvin is coming in as a number 3 wide receiver. LaShawn McCoy is a top 3 or 4 running back in this league right now. They bring in Charles Clay, which is the biggest threat they've had at tight end basically in my lifetime. Or at least since those 90s Buffalo Bills teams. The defense obviously is going to be just as solid. They haven't lost anyone significant. They have only added, although you can argue that Denoris Searcy was a big loss. And if they wanted to bring Brandon Spikes back, he's still floating around out there, but I don't think they're going to make a move on him. So I think the Bills have done enough and brought in the right coach where I think this could be a good season, one where they finally make the playoffs. I don't think this is a Super Bowl winning team because I do think offensively there's going to be time that needs to gel. Their offensive line has some huge questions, and maybe it's huge questions, but a lot of these guys are first-year, second-year players, so maybe they have time to turn it around. maybe they can grab someone in the second round. That's the biggest issue with them, is they don't have a first-round pick. So, yes, I have the Buffalo Bills right now being the number 12 team, but unlike everybody else, they don't have a first-round pick. This is a team that can be leapfrogged by the Chargers, by the Giants, by the Texans, by the Vikings. So, depending on how things fall, you could see this team easily drop down to number 20. Number 11, I have the steady, always in the playoffs and losing in the first round, the Cincinnati Bengals. Until such time where I see them actually completely fall off. Putting this team outside of the top 12, which is basically the playoff contending teams, this team has to stay there. I mean, Andy Dalton is a average NFL quarterback. It's been established, but you know what? Average is better than what a lot of teams have. If the Texans had an average team, or an average quarterback, they'd be ahead of the Bengals. If the Bills had one, they'd be ahead of them. If the Jets had one, they'd be ahead of them. So a lot of these teams would settle for average compared to what they have. I mean, if you look underneath the Cincinnati Bengals, they're number 11, and I could argue only 3 teams have an upgraded quarterback. Let's see, who's got a better quarterback situation than the Cincinnati Bengals from the teams that are below them? You can argue the Dolphins, although Ryan Tannehill, I'm not 100% sold on him. Teddy Bridgewater is still young. Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, Drew Brees, but again, you're only going to get Drew Brees for another 2 years. Cam Newton, and maybe, Matt Ryan, I forgot about him, and Colin Kaepernick. So, I mean, there's some teams down there with better quarterback situations, but the Bengals have a solid overall roster. So, yes, if you put a Matt Ryan on this roster, I think they're a Super Bowl team. If you put a really good quarterback on here, they're a Super Bowl team. They have Andy Dalton, they're still a playoff team, and that's a pretty good place to be. Their moves, I don't think they've done anything splashy so far, and they don't have to. They're just solid. They just need Andy Dalton to sort of just be a little more consistent. That's all they need. I know it's a lot to ask, and it's never going to happen, but if you look at someone like the Chiefs with Alex Smith, he's not flashy, he doesn't put up good numbers, but he's consistent, and he doesn't lose a game for you. And that's all they really need out of Andy Dalton. And yes, I'm suggesting that the Bengals should trade Andy Dalton for Alex Smith. Not really, no. You're not getting that much of an upgrade, you're just getting some consistency. So, I think the Bengals will be good, but I think that wide receiver core, there's some holes in that now after A.J. Green. I'm not 100% sure what you got. So, there are some questions that they can address in the draft very easily. Coming in, we're in the top 10 now, and at number 10, I have Chip Kelly, the genius in the Philadelphia Eagles. Before the whole trading started, I probably would have put them a little bit higher than this. I don't think they downgraded that much necessarily with all these trades, but I do question their wide receiver core, and that's where Chip Kelly better be a genius and better be right. Quarterback, Sam Bradford, I feel like he could be a top 10 quarterback if he could have a healthy season in the right system. And I think putting him on the Eagles, if he he can stay healthy and play anywhere from 14 to 16 games, he could be a Pro Bowler. I genuinely believe that he's had enough good games. If I was, as a Bills fan, I would take Sam Bradford even for 8 games a season, because that would be an upgrade for those 8 seasons. And a lot of teams are in that. That's why you heard about the Browns offering a first-round pick for him. So, I think the Eagles are still in a good position, but this could very well, if it blows up, you got another season of Mark Sanchez, who every single game he played got a little bit worse. So, I think the Eagles could still be a playoff team, or everything could blow up in their face and you could be looking at a 6-10 team. It could go either way. Number 9, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and their no defense. What happened? Why are we talking about the Bears and the Steelers about their offense and not their defense? Steelers still genuinely have a decent defense, at least. Dick LeBeau is gone, which that might actually be a good thing. I think he's been with the team for about 72 years. So maybe it was about time for him to go. But offensively, they exploded. Ben Roethlisberger was only one good pass away from having 5,000 yards. The Steelers have always had really solid wide receivers. You know, Antonio Brown is a beast, but Mike Wallace is floating around. He was on there. Plaxico Burress was from there. Hines Ward, obviously the great Hines Ward. They've had a long history of really good wide receivers, but now Ben Roethlisberger is sort of taking control of this. And on top of that, you have Le'Veon Bell, who could arguably be the best running back in the league right now. Really good offense. And again, I don't know whether or not they have a bad offensive line or if it's just Ben Roethlisberger tries to make so many plays that they look worse than they are. But obviously they're a very good run-blocking offensive line, so offensively they're set. Defensively, you just got to add a couple pieces. But this is the team that won the division last year. I don't think they're the best team in this division, but I think they're number one rivals in the Ravens. It will be an interesting race to the division crown. Or they could beat each other up so much that the Bengals swoop in and steal it again. That's always in the realm of possibility. Number 8, I have the Denver Broncos. I don't think Peyton Manning is going to be a terrible quarterback. I don't think he's going to fall all the way down to Andy Dalton, Ryan Tannehill, that level. He's not going to be a top 5 quarterback. He might be for the first couple of games, but I think he's going to majorly fall off. I'm not giving up on him yet. But again, we'll see. Let's check back on this in November after he's played a bunch. He's never missed any time during a season, with the exception of the neck injury when he missed an entire season. He's never missed a game due to injury besides that one season. You know, it's the same as Tom Brady. Tom Brady had that one freak injury and missed the rest of that season, but otherwise has never missed a start due to anything else. I could see this being the season, sort of like Brett Favre when he was at the end of his career, where he finally missed games due to injury. And I think the Broncos, if they're up, I mean, this division might not be that strong. You know, I think the Chargers could be good, but I don't think the Raiders or Chiefs are going to be any good. So if they have a 3-game lead in their, if they clinch a division in, mid-November or something like that, which is in the realm of possibility, then I say you just bench Peyton Manning for 3 weeks. I think that's just something you should consider. Because I don't think they're getting either of the top 2 seeds no matter what. I don't think that's going to happen. Unless they go 6-0 in their division and manage to win some of their other games, I don't think they're getting a top 2 seed. Because I think the top 2 teams in the AFC, I don't think they can touch. Even the top 3, because I think the Colts could have a better record than them because the Colts get the feast on the AFC South. So I think it'll be an interesting season in Denver. New head coach in Gary Kubiak. Not 100% sold on him. You lost Daniel Thomas. Who knows where that's going? Demaryius Thomas is franchised. He might not be happy about it. And you lost Terrence Knighton in the middle, which, on the defensive line, might not seem like that big a deal, but it could be. So, Broncos, I'm not going to say they're going to fall off the map, but I do think it's a step back, and I think last year was their year to do it. Number 7, I have the Arizona Cardinals. I believe in Bruce Arians that much. I don't know what's going to happen with the quarterback situation. I don't know what Carson Palmer is going to do, but I think this is a prime team to go in second, third round, whatever it may be, and grab one of these second or third tier quarterbacks and develop them for the future. I think if Drew Stanton had stayed healthy, I think they would have been a better team in the playoffs last season. But getting both of your top 2 quarterbacks injured, it's just not going to go well. But they have a very good wide receivers for whichever quarterback steps in to hopefully work with. Running back is an issue. Offensive line is strong. They went out and got Mikey Upati, so that should help the running game out tremendously. Defensively, Todd Bowles did leave, but I think they could be okay still. But what's really interesting with this team, because this is now talked about as the prime destination for Adrian Peterson if he leaves Minnesota. If Adrian Peterson goes to the Cardinals, I will put them up into my top 4. Very easily. Just with that one move, I will put him up there. Because I think the running game, having that kind of running back will be that big of an impact on them. So, Arizona, like I said, it's unfortunate what happened last season, but I believe in this team and I think they can do well. At number 6, I have the Dallas Cowboys. This obviously proves that I am in the camp of I don't think DeMarco Murray is going to be that huge of a loss. I think he's a big loss, But I don't think the answer is Darren McFadden. I think this is, I mean, they're late first round. They're going to be able to get their hands on a running back. You got to think. If the common trend continues and nobody wants to draft any of these guys, they're sitting there at 27. And that could be where Todd Gurley is still sitting around coming off an ACL injury. That could be where Melvin Gordon is even still sitting around. And you've got a lot of teams that need a running back, but also have other needs ahead of them. Or the Jets, or not the Jets, the Falcons, are they going to take a running back at number 8? Or are they going to take a pass rusher like they really need? Are the Chargers going to take a running back, or are they actually going to be content with what they have? Are the 49ers going to consider drafting another one? Are the Browns with one of their picks going to take one? I mean, would the Rams take one at number 10? There are teams ahead of them that would strongly consider going after a running back. And we got to throw the Eagles in there because apparently they just want every running back in existence. You have the Lions sitting right there. They don't have an answer at running back. So there are some other teams ahead of them, but I think they could be able to grab a really good running back in this draft. Defensively, Sean Lee's coming back, which is going to help. That's someone who they really missed last season. Rolando McClain just re-signed. They're stretched thin on the salary cap, but they have a very solid roster there. And who knows what goes on with Des Bryant, but that's something to be more concerned about as far as 2016 goes. And I do think this is a team with a very limited window. It sucks that now is the time when I finally got a good team around Tony Romo, but he's 35. You're not going to get a lot else out of him. So, buyer beware. At number 5, it's the team that I hated with a passion last season, but I told you that was only for 2014. Number 5 is the Baltimore Ravens. I do think, even though they're not rated this way, I think they're the second best team in the AFC right now. But as far as the moves that they made go, I'm going to put the Colts ahead of them because I think the Colts made some better moves. But the Ravens are really strong, and their biggest weakness is cornerback. They still haven't really addressed it. Now, a lot of that last season came down to injury, but obviously you need some cornerback help. And this isn't a strong draft for the secondary, so that's going to be a major question mark heading into next season, you got to figure. So that's my only question with the Ravens. Otherwise, the rest of the defense, I don't think losing Haloti Ngata is even going to affect them in the least. And offensively, they're fine. They re-signed Bernard Pierce. They released Bernard Pierce, but they re-signed Justin Forsett, who was pretty solid for them last year. They could go after a running back. They could also wait until the second round, get another guy to develop. But I think the Ravens, otherwise, besides secondary, I don't think they have a lot of holes, and I think they will be fine. Will Torrey Smith being lost affect them? No, because I don't think Torrey Smith is that great of a wide receiver other than he draws a lot of pass interference. That's why I didn't mention him with the 49ers. I don't think he's going to be a huge upgrade for him. Number 4 is where I have the Indianapolis Colts. And again, you could talk me either way into the Ravens or the Colts being here. That's why I have them right next to each other. I think the Colts have added a lot of pieces. Basically, Trent Cole on defense to help with the pass rush. They signed Frank Gore to get, anything's an upgrade over Trent Richardson. And I think Frank Gore at least has one more decent to good season left in the tank. Andre Johnson, I think, will thrive. Even if he is getting older, I think with Andrew Luck throwing him the ball, paired with T.Y. Hilton, I think that's a good 1-2 punch right there. Plus, you have really good tight ends. I do like a lot of what the Colts did. They didn't go out and sign, $100 million players, but who they signed, they made some impact signings. They did it intelligently, and I like that. And that's why I'll put them here at number 4, and I would love to see Andrew Luck just really... they went to the conference game last season, and I think they could do it again this season. But again, I think the top of the AFC is going to be very competitive this season. Number 3, I have the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, they didn't sign anyone. Again, the statistic is Julius Peppers is the only player on this roster that has suited up with the team other than the Packers. Everyone else has been there, was drafted or signed as an undrafted free agent by them. And all they did this season was they re-signed almost every single free agent they were about to lose. So they were a very good team last season, and they just stayed the same at least. I mean, they almost were in the playoffs, or in the Super Bowl rather, except for a miraculous comeback by the Seahawks. A lot of their players are young, and they're just going to be a little bit better going in the next season, and you have the reigning MVP in Aaron Rodgers. So, the Packers, I think, again, it's between them and my number 2 team for who the best team in the NFC is. Number 2, I have the Seattle Seahawks. I'm not 100% sure that getting Jimmy Graham for Max Unger was an improvement for them. I think that helps out in the passing game. They really needed a weapon, but Max Unger, I think, is going to hurt them in the running game. And again, this is all coming from, I've seen Marshawn Lynch firsthand in Buffalo, and I've seen what a terrible offensive line does to him. He doesn't do very well. So I think Marshawn Lynch is going to take a step back this season. I think Russell Wilson will carry more of the offense, and I think it's fine. I think that's what he should do. He's been to 2 Super Bowls in 3 seasons, so maybe it is time for him to get a little more of the reins in that, as far as passing the ball a little bit more. I don't think the Seahawks have downgraded a lot in any way, but again, I don't think they've upgraded a lot. So staying exactly the same for the runner-up in the Super Bowl, who, again, one questionable play call away from winning the Super Bowl, I think they're fine. And the number 1 team is the New England Patriots, the Super Bowl champions. Yes, losing Darrelle Revis is going to hurt, but they've won Super Bowls without great secondaries before. They still have Gronk. They lost Shane Vereen, which I think is going to be an overrated loss for them, because the way Patriots fans are talking about him was, oh, you're going to be the next Kevin Falk. Do you know who Kevin Falk is? I didn't think so. I know who he is because I have to hear about him all the time. Kevin Falk was essentially the permanent third down back for the Patriots for about 7 seasons. All he did was come in and make 12-yard catches and then go back to the bench for 2 quarters. That was Shane Vereen's potential in New England, so it's not like they lost a big threat there. LeGarrette Blount just got suspended for a game. Big deal. The Patriots will be fine. They've done it without a running back before. And I don't even think LeGarrette Blount is that great of a running back. Wide receivers, I think they're fine. They don't have anyone who's going to be all-pro, going to the Hall of Fame, but they've got a solid wide receiver core. They have Gronk. That offensive line turned it around last season. You could argue they need some help, but they should be fine. Defensively, yes, they lost some secondary, but I think the rest of the defense will be fine. I think they'll find some pieces. And I still think the Patriots are the best team in the NFL. I do think the gap has closed significantly, but as of right now, as much as the Darrelle Revis and Brandon Browner losses might hurt, I think they're going to be just fine. And I think, once again, 12-4, and they'll win the AFC East, just like they've done for the last 15 years. So, those are my power rankings. That is just how I see the teams right now. And let me know what you guys think of my power rankings. And just who do you think had the best offseason? Is that my question of the day? I might just be asking you a second question of the day. Let's see. Question of the day is not loading. What the hell? I'm glad I spell checked this real quick. So the question of the day is, which team got better than they were before free agency, and which team got worse? My answer to this, I think that a team that got significantly better would be... I think the Colts got a lot better. I think the Bills got a lot better. I think the Eagles, even trade-off. But yeah, I think the Colts, the Jets, and the Bills are the teams I think actually got better. Even though I don't think the free agency and trades is necessarily how you get better, but I think they did anyways. And a team that got significantly worse. Again, you're going to float the Eagles in there regardless. I think... Well, if we're including the entire offseason, I think the 49ers got significantly worse. And I think the Lions really are the team who got worse. I think the Lions are definitely the biggest downgrade after free agency. But Let me know what you guys think. So, thank you guys for listening. Again, please be sure to answer the question of the day down below in the comments. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe for more content. And before we go, I have one major announcement going. This will be the last JellybeanSniper.net NFL podcast. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be my last podcast. We are rebranding. Yeah, again, yes, okay, whatever. I get it. I understand. But I'm going to be launching a brand new website, which I will get the URL at some point for you. But for now, the website will be The Illegal Shift. I will be not only continuing to do the podcast under the name Illegal Shift, I will also be offering up blogs and stuff like that. Go to JellybeanSniper.net if you want to look for any updates on that. As soon as it's ready to go, I will be posting it there along with all my other content. The next podcast will be a preview of the draft, but before that, there will be an Illegal Shift post, a blog post, which I've already written up, in which I go through and decide that for 2016, the NFL really needs to consider realignment if they really want to fix this playoff scenario. And it's pretty drastic, and I break up quite a few rivalries. So I've already shown it to some people, and they strongly disagree with what I did. And that's exactly what I'm aiming for. So be sure to keep track of me on Twitter, @JellybeanSniper. Stay tuned to JellybeanSniper.net. It will have all the updates, and as soon as Illegal Shift goes live, it will be there first. So thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you again next time under a brand new name.